What's happening, people? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. Now, I've been a fan of the Soulcalibur series for many years, so it was only natural that I checked out the latest entry in the series, Soulcalibur VI. I have to give a big shout out to Bandai Namco for sending me the game to review for you guys. Really appreciate that. But without further ado, let's just dive into this review. This is Soulcalibur VI. Soulcalibur VI is the latest entry of Bandai Namco's weapon-based fighting series. Though it's a brand new game in the franchise, it's also treated as a soft reboot to the story of the very first Soulcalibur game. If you've never played the series before, Soulcalibur is all about fighting with weapons and over-the-top looking characters from throughout history. Not only are the visuals gorgeous to see in motion, but they're complemented by an amazing soundtrack and very good voice acting. There's nowhere else you could have a feudal Japan era samurai fight a beautiful yet fierce Athenian maiden with some of the most epic music and announcer voice that you ever heard in a fighting game. There are various modes in Soulcalibur VI with all the standard stuff you'd expect from a Bandai Namco fighting game. Arcade and training mode, online and offline multiplayer, as well as lots of single-player story that Soulcalibur fans will want to dive into. Even though it will undoubtedly get updates and patches over time, the foundation of Soulcalibur VI's fighting system is well designed and packs a very good punch that fighting game fans will love. Now, I have to say that the fighting in Soulcalibur VI is incredibly solid. I feel like a lot of the stuff that people have loved from entries like Soulcalibur II and Soulcalibur III are present and accounted for, but it still has some of the nuances and some of the newer additions from places like Part 4 and Part 5. Even though people didn't really like those games, some of those mechanics still kind of resonated with some people, so it's kind of like a greatest hits version of all the Soulcalibur games right up to this point. However, don't get me wrong, I still feel like it's still more akin to Soulcalibur III, which was kind of like a fine-tuning of Soulcalibur II, where things are not only fast, but all the mechanics just feel right. For me personally, I enjoy playing with Mitsurugi and Sophidia, and even Killick to an extent. But I also feel like I could go through the entire roster and feel like I'm getting work done whenever I go online or playing against my friends locally. The fighting is incredibly solid and easy to get into, but it still has enough depth for those that really want to get into the intricacies of it, can really explore some of the different moves, the frame data, and all the other stuff that's really going to work for the competitive scene. As far as the diversity of the roster, I feel like there's a lot of different unique fighters. It's always been the case with the Soulcalibur games, but this one in particular, there's a wide array of different types of characters and fighting styles that you're going to have a whole lot of fun exploring around with. And of course, we have to talk about Geralt, the Witcher, who is a guest character in this game, and that's always been a staple of the Soulcalibur series, and I feel like they picked a great character to be the guest character for Soulcalibur VI. It possibly might not be as hype-inducing as Link was with Soulcalibur II, but this is still a solid selection, and I'm curious to see what other types of characters that are guest characters will show up in DLC. But one of the things for me that I felt like was important with the Soulcalibur games, especially with Part 3 onward, was the story mode. There are two main story modes in Soulcalibur VI. First, there's the Soul Chronicle mode, which is your typical story mode in a fighting game that follows the entire cast of characters included. Again, the plot is a retelling of the story mode from the very first Soulcalibur game, but with a few changes that match up to later entries of the series. Before you're able to dive into the individual stories of each fighter, you first need to finish a straightforward story that follows Killick. After about 20 or so chapters, then you're able to play as other characters in their own narratives that happen parallel to the events of the main story. While I'm totally fine with the larger story mode like this, I wish that it was handled more kind of like how Mortal Kombat or Injustice did their story modes, where I'm going through the larger story but switching perspectives between characters. In Soul Chronicles, however, you're getting the plot out of order. Everyone gets their story told, but I wish it was a little bit more organized in a different way. Now, I'm not saying that Soulcalibur VI's story is terrible by any stretch. It's actually quite good as a retelling of the first Soulcalibur game. However, games like Injustice 2, Mortal Kombat, and even Tekken 7 to an extent have really spoiled me with the presentation and how an actual story mode should be handled with a fighting game. I would have rather had it where I was actually jumping between perspectives of different characters and doing an assortment of matches with a cohesive storyline, rather than just going through one main story focused on one character and then have to go back to all the other sub-stories afterwards. I just think I would have absorbed a lot more of what was going on a lot better. I would have never really kind of like not cared for certain characters, and I would have been a little bit more excited to see where everybody's role played in the greater narrative. But even beyond that, I have to comment on the visuals of the actual story mode, which I feel like is a huge missed opportunity. There are in-game cutscenes throughout Chronicle of Soul and some of the various sub-stories as well, and I feel like if they would have just presented it like that and just given me in-game cutscenes, kind of like what Injustice or Mortal Kombat does, it would have been a far much more better story mode. I understand why they did it, and I think that it was kind of more like a stylistic type of thing, but this didn't really resonate with me too much, and I would have rather had it in a different way, more akin to what they did with Tekken 7. However, that being said, I do have to commend the voice acting and a lot of the soundtrack of what's going on throughout the entire story mode. I feel like it sounds very epic, it sounds really freaking cool. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to Zasalamel's story mode. That entire time, you're not even playing a matchup, but just listen to his voiceover. It just sounds so freaking epic. But that's not all the story of what you're getting with Soulcalibur VI. There's an entire different story mode that focuses more on the created characters, which again is a little bit different than what you get with Soul Chronicles. The other story mode in Soulcalibur VI is Libra of Soul, which is made for custom characters that you create. The story follows your character, known as the Conduit, before and parallel to the main plot of Soul Chronicles, but gives some extra context and other events outside of what happens in the main story. Many of the events do come off as a little mediocre compared to everything else that happens in Soul Chronicles, but if you wanted to know what some of the characters were doing at different points of the timeline, Libra of Soul does give a little bit more about it. However, this story mode does feel a little bit forced into the game to me. Much of the exploration on the world map and the light RPG mechanics are out of place and kinda shallow. You could travel between points via the menus, but then will randomly have to explore nearby areas to reach certain missions at the cost of money you gain from finishing battles. Your character could gain new weapons and level up as you win battles, but again, this feels forced into Libra of Soul compared to the rest of the game. Leveling up hardly means anything other than being able to equip certain weapons and deal enough damage against certain enemies later in the story. The difficulty of enemies can vary and at times feels a little bit unbalanced in some spots, but there's almost always a way you could easily complete the battle somehow. Libra of Soul is a pretty long story mode, so you'll definitely get a lot of game time out of it, but I would have just been fine playing through Soul Chronicles as the main story and completely not diving into this one. As much as I tried very hard to like what Libra of Soul was doing, I just didn't really connect with it. Especially after going through all the Soul Chronicles, and which is much more of a traditional story mode when it comes to a fighting game, everything else that Libra of Soul was trying to do just felt very forced in, very bloated, and really hyper-extended. All the RPG elements, while I appreciate that and I think it's interesting to try to implement that into a fighting game, it just feels like it was just ham-fisted into there. It's very basic, very shallow, and doesn't really come into play too much, save for a few points throughout the story. All the different side missions and side battles that you could get involved with, there's plenty of them to do, but it feels like all the effort that you put into them, some of the rewards aren't really matching up to either the difficulty or the amount of time that you could spend kind of doing all of them. In addition to that, there's a bunch of different dialogue sections which don't involve any battles, but it's just giving you more plot and more story details, but it feels like extra fluff that's in there and something that's already fluffed up to begin with. By the time you reach the conclusion of Libra of Soul, I feel like, again, it just feels like the journey that you took over there wasn't all that great, and the conclusion is kind of meh compared to what you get with the Chronicles of Soul. If Libra of Soul wasn't included in Soulcalibur VI, I probably would have been totally fine with that, just doing the regular story mode, which, again, focuses more on the characters and the roster of the entirety of Soulcalibur VI, rather than just focusing on just this tangential story that was kind of like parallel to what was going on in the main plot. But outside of all that, we have to talk about multiplayer, which is what Soulcalibur and pretty much fighting games are really all about. Multiplayer is what Soulcalibur does best, and luckily Soulcalibur VI has everything you need. Jumping online and fighting others around the world is what you expect, with not many issues connecting to others. There's ranked and casual matches, as well as leaderboards to show where you rank against everyone else. But of course you need the offline multiplayer for when you have a few friends over. Nothing more, nothing less, but it's still just as fun nonetheless. Outside of that, however, there is a gallery mode that you can view extra artwork and promotional material, some of which you could purchase using soul points earned by playing every other mode in the game. If you win a lot of matches online, you can earn enough soul points to purchase some new items in the museum. However, it is disappointing to see Soulcalibur VI take a step back with the amount of items you could view compared to Bandai Namco's other games like Tekken 7. There's no in-game cutscenes from older Soul Calibur games, no music collection, and no other regional extras that would have been interesting to have. If a game like Tekken 7 can have all of this, there's no reason Soul Calibur 6 couldn't have as well, especially since it references all the other games in the series. Despite that, however, there's still plenty to love when returning to the stage of history. Even after all these years, Soul Calibur multiplayer is still incredibly fun. There's nothing like beating down on your opponent and taking away their dignity, or even just embarrassing them because you knocked them off the stage because they were careless enough to let you do so. I can't even begin to tell you guys how many times that's happened to me online, and also happened to a bunch of other people I've played against online, both in ranked matches and in casual matches. But even beyond that, the character creation in Soul Calibur 6 is still pretty damn good, even though it's not as in-depth or in detail as a lot of other character creation modes in other video games. I'm still amazed at how crazy some people can be when it comes to making different characters from movies, video games, comics, and all this other stuff that just surprises me every single time. People put a lot of time into this and they get pretty damn good about it. However, I should warn you, because it actually happened to me on stream, there are a couple not safe for work moments in there that just, again, I can't even begin to describe to you. Go look on my Twitch archive, you guys will see exactly what I'm talking about. Another thing I want to touch on is the gallery and the museum section of the game, which I feel like is very meager and a huge step back compared to what we got with Tekken 7. I do appreciate all the different promotional art and the different concept art and character artwork for various different games in the Soulcalibur series, including Soul Blade. However, it's a real shame that we didn't get any of the actual arcade movies or intro movies or any of that other CG cutscene stuff that we saw throughout the entirety of the Soulcalibur series, which is exactly what Tekken 7 did. If this was supposed to be a celebration of the resurgence of Soulcalibur, that was a huge missed opportunity, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people who played Tekken 7 are probably saying the exact same thing. That being said, however, is Soulcalibur VI a game that everybody should dive into? Absolutely. I feel like no matter what skill level you have, if you're just playing this casually or if you want to get highly competitive with the game, I feel like you're going to have a lot of fun regardless, no matter what skill level you're at. There's a game here with a solid foundation with its fighting system, a whole bunch of different characters to love, great visuals, great amazing and epic music, and a bunch of little extras here and there to enjoy on the side. Anyway guys, that's my thoughts on Soulcalibur 6. Let me know what's up in the comment section down below and tell me what your favorite Soulcalibur character is. It doesn't even need to be from Soulcalibur 6, it could be from the entirety of the series. Curious to see where you guys actually put down there. And if you can, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for all my videos just like this one, all my game reviews, all my podcast shows, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. And don't forget guys, I'm on Patreon right now. You guys can support my content on Patreon. I want to give a big shout out to Jasmine Russell for supporting me at the Beast tier level over on my Patreon page. You're going to be getting shout outs for the entire month on every single video, every single review, podcast, all that stuff right here on the YouTube channel. You're getting a lot of love. If you guys want that same type of love, or if you just want to support my content that I do here on YouTube, check the links in the description box below that goes directly to my Patreon page and consider pledging. There's a whole bunch of exclusive content for doing so. I hope you guys will enjoy it. Anyway, I will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody. Thanks for checking out this video review, guys. I really appreciate all the support everybody has been giving me. Make sure you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos just like this one, and don't forget to leave me a comment and like this video as well. I'll have more videos for you guys to enjoy here on the side. I will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out, and stay epic, everybody.